Hello, Steve White's 89. Well, I have been enjoying all the classic horror anthology movies lately. I watched Creepshow first, then I watched Tales of the Crypt. Now, Tales of the Crypt is a bit confusing because the original film came out in 1972, starred Joan Collins, and the first story is pretty great. It's weird the way they present these films. Basically, a bunch of people go into a crypt for some reason. They meet the crypt keeper. He sort of keeps them hostage and then tells them these stories that involve the people. But there's a distance from them because they don't appear to be real and really happening. They seem to be stories that he's telling. So although you enjoy them, like the first story is Joan Collins' character killing the guy she's living with and then being killed by a Santa, a stalker dressed as Santa because her daughter lets him in because she thinks he's Santa and that. And then there's... the other stories are less interesting. I don't want to run through them all actually, but basically each person gets their story told, and then at the end they find out that they've all died and they're basically in purgatory and hell and they all move on to hell. Now that seemed to be a one-off film until they did the series Tales from the Crypt, which had a different kind of crypt keeper. This crypt keeper was just a regular guy. He kind of dressed like a monk, but he sort of was just a regular guy. Whereas later in the series, he's more of like a cackling witch-like zombie, Evil Dead sort of, Walking Dead sort of character. In the second film, there is actually a sequel. Vault of Horror was technically the second Tales from the Crypt film. It was often called Vault of Horror, More Tales from the Crypt, or Tales from the Crypt Part 2. And the weird thing is they didn't actually use any Vault of Horror stories. They're all Tales from the Crypt stories, I think, because there are a couple of these magazines that were the big sort of magazine comics back in the day that were the horror comics. And Vault of Horror was one of the titles, but they didn't use any of the actual stories from them in this. So the second film, it's got Tom Baker. Most interesting story for me was the artist who gets screwed over by people, so he gets a voodoo power put on him where he can just kill anyone that he paints, or anything he paints happening to someone happens to them. But that backfires. There's another story about a man who tries to steal a magic rope from a magician, and they end up getting killed. Everyone meets, they all die. But in this film, these people are all telling these stories. They basically go into an elevator and they end up in this sort of crypt, this vault at the bottom of a building, and they're all telling these stories of these nightmares that they've had. And then at the end, it gets revealed to them that they all happened and they are indeed in some sort of purgatory and they move on to hell, kind of like the first film, which I guess is what they do in the comics. I've never read the original comics, so I'm not sure. But and then we went on and they did Tales from the Crypt, the series, and that was very different. They had the host, which was very memorable, and it did really well. I think it did 6 years on, I think, one of the cable channels. And then they did a couple of TV movies as well. And now Creepshow has a TV series as well on, I think, Shudder. And I thought they were just doing more Tales from the Crypt, the TV series. But Creepshow, these shows, they're all very similar, and they're getting sort of, I think, sort of blurred together a bit, and I'm having trouble differentiating them. I did watch them all over the last couple of days, and now I'm trying to remember them separately to sort of do a bit of review. But I know these films are good. Joan Collins, her character is good. Tom Baker's character is good. The other stories are a little smaller. There's a guy who kills his sister, and I'm guessing if you are watching this, you've already seen them. And no one should watch a review of a film before, seeing it, of course. But there's a guy in a town of vampires. There's some interesting stories. And I'm kind of surprised that these films are related. I never realised they were, but they felt like sort of the same thing. And then I realised, they actually were related. For some reason, they used the different titles. Instead of Tales from the Crypt 2, they made a Vault of Horror film using Tales of the Crypt stories. But then they sort of put that in the subtitle and tried to relate them. I'm like, why not just do a part 2? I don't know, I guess they thought it would sell better than a part 2, like a new title would sell better than a part 2 of any other title. But yeah, I enjoyed them. I'm glad I finally watched them because I must have watched this back in the day, but I don't remember watching the first one, and I certainly didn't watch the second one. I just sort of put them aside and thought I'll watch them one day and never got around to it. So I think I bought the first one on DVD and I did watch it, but I wasn't paying a lot of attention. That was like 10 years ago. So glad to watch that again. Glad you realised the second one was related and to watch them both together. But I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think of these classic films. I love horror anthologies. They're kind of my favourite, and there are not enough of them because they don't do well commercially usually. But there's a few of them now, and it's kind of been fun to go through them all. But I'm going to go. Thanks. Bye. I want to keep that review to like 5 minutes, but I want to talk about a couple of the other stories in the first Tales from the Crypt. Partly because I was just looking at the Wikipedia and was reminded of them. The first one is called Poetic Justice, and this one stars Peter Cushing, who was in the original Star Wars and a lot of horror movies back in the day. It's a really tragic, sad story, and it's quite heartbreaking. The first part of it, Peter Cushing does a great acting job. Basically, there's this old guy, he's a widow, he lives in a house by himself, he's got a bunch of dogs, he has a lot of friends of local kids. He basically makes toys for the kids and refurbishes toys from the junkyard and gives them to the kids, and he's very popular. And these neighbours, this father and son, do not like him because they feel like he's bringing down their property value and so forth, and they just want to get rid of him. So mostly the son plots to get rid of him. They report him to the police for the dogs, so they take all these dogs away, except for one that came back later, but took all these dogs away. And then they went to all the parents, and basically all the parents tell the kids they can't play with him anymore. And then on Valentine's Day, they send him a bunch of Valentine's Day cards, basically pretending to be everyone in the town, basically saying they hate him, that he ruins the town, they want him to kill himself, which is what he does on Valentine's Day. And then a year later, he comes back from the dead and kills the father and son. And it's quite not rewarding, it's quite enjoyable, basically. But the first part of the story is very sad and very heartbreaking, and like I said, Peter Cushing does a really great acting job, and you kind of forget you're watching a horror movie for a minute. It's just this really horrible sort of, it's really horrific in other ways. And then when he comes back as a zombie, it's like you're watching another movie. It's quite sort of contrasting. But there are other couple stories that were interesting as well. Wish You Were Here, that they've got this Chinese figurine that grants 3 wishes, and they don't have much luck. One of the guys dies. They try and bring him back. They bring him back before he died, before the car accident, but he died from a heart attack. That's why the car crashed. And they bring him back forever, so he can't die. So even though they try and kill him, cut him into pieces, he won't die. And it's just a comedy of errors and a nightmare. There's another story where a guy leaves his wife to be with another woman, and they crash the car and die, and he comes back as a zombie. That one didn't make a lot of sense, but it was interesting because the girlfriend was blinded and didn't recognise him right away. And everyone else, of course, was horrified when they saw him as a zombie, like walking around 2 years later. I think it was a year later. And the other one, Blind Alleys. This was this guy. Am I reading the right one? Yes, there's a bunch of blind people that this guy's taken care of. He used to be in the army as a major, and he doesn't treat them very well. And eventually, he like cuts off their heat and everything, and one of them dies. So they decide to get revenge on him, and they basically lock him in a room and then build a trap that he has to try and escape to get out. And of course, he doesn't and dies. So a lot of these stories are revenge, and you kind of enjoy them because of what the person did. And I think that's all of them now. Yes, All Through the House was the one with Joan Collins. Yep, the guy leaves his wife for his secretary, Poetic Justice. Wish You Were Here was the one with the... Yep, that's all of them. So yeah, I remember those stories. I kind of forgot them when I was going through it the first time. And I wanted to comment on them because I thought they were quite enjoyable. I thought Peter Cushing's performance was amazing. And the other ones were quite... I mean, the British, anthologies are a bit different from the American ones. They've got a very subtle, nasty sort of humour to them. And they're more revenge orientated. But I enjoyed them all. So Tales from the Dark Side, Tales from the Crypt, Creep Show, they're all great. And I just want to talk about them for a minute because why not? But I'm going to go. I'm really going to go this time. Bye.